The digital clock on the microwave flashed 3:45 a.m. in a dim kitchen that had seen better days. For most people, this was the dead of night, a time for deep sleep and forgotten dreams. For Chloe, it was the start of her day. She moved with a quiet, practiced efficiency, her body already programmed for the routine. The soft hum of the coffee maker was the morning's first song. While it brewed, she tiptoed into her son's room, a small space overflowing with drawings, toy cars, and a towering stack of picture books from the library. His small chest rose and fell in a peaceful rhythm, his face free from the worries that would soon cloud his mother's own. She leaned down and kissed his forehead, breathing in the sweet, clean smell of him. He was her everything, the engine that kept her going when the tank was on empty. This job, the long hours on her feet, the endless cycle of bills, it was all for him. She left a note on the fridge for her mother, who would arrive in an hour to get her grandson ready for kindergarten, and slipped out the door into the cool pre-dawn air. The city was still asleep, but she was wide awake, her mind already running through the list of things that needed to be done. Rent was due in 3 days, and she was still short. The payment for his after-school program was looming, a constant, quiet pressure on her heart. She tightened the strap on her worn work shoes and began the walk to the bus stop. The shoes were supposed to be non-slip and supportive, but after a year of constant use, the soles were thin and the arches had given up. Her feet would be aching by noon, a dull, persistent throb that she had learned to live with. The restaurant was called the Gilded Spoon. It was one of those places that tried very hard to be fancy, with white tablecloths, slightly too dim lighting, and a menu full of words she sometimes had to practice saying. Pansered scallops with a saffron beurre blanc was a mouthful. To the people who ate there, it was a special occasion spot. To Chloe, it was just work. It was a battlefield of demanding customers, hot plates, and a manager who believed rules were more important than people. His name was Mr. Davies, a man who seemed to measure his own success by the strictness he imposed on others. He walked around with a permanent frown and a clipboard, as if he were auditing a factory instead of running a restaurant. He had never said a kind word to her, not once in the 2 years she had worked there. Her performance was fine, even good on most days, but she was not one of his favorites. She wasn't bubbly or flirtatious with the wealthy male clientele, and she never tried to suck up to him. She just did her job and went home. When she arrived, the morning crew was just finishing their cleanup. The air was thick with the smell of bleach and stale coffee. She clocked in the clunk of the old-time card machine, a familiar sound, and went to get her uniform. As she tied the crisp white apron around her waist, she caught a glimpse of herself in the back hallway mirror. A tired black woman stared back, the shadows under her eyes a little darker today. She forced a smile, the one she used for customers. It didn't quite reach her eyes, but it would have to do. Today was going to be a tough one. She could already feel it. Maria, one of the best servers, had called in sick, which meant the lunch rush would be handled by 2 fewer people. Mr. Davies had already posted a terse note on the board about efficiency and teamwork, a clear warning that he would be watching everyone closely. The first hour was a slow trickle to few early bird business people. Chloe used the time to restock her station, polish the water glasses until they shone, and memorize the specials. But by 11:30, the floodgates opened. The restaurant filled up quickly, the quiet hum replaced by a cacophony of clinking silverware, loud conversations, and the constant sharp calls from the kitchen. Order up for table 7. Chloe, party of 4 needs water. Table 3 is asking for the manager. She was a whirlwind of motion, her mind splitting into a dozen different directions. She carried heavy trays of food balanced precariously on one arm, her muscles straining with the weight. She refilled drinks, took orders, cleared plates, and processed payments, all with a smile plastered on her face. Her feet, which had been aching at the start of the shift, were now screaming. She could feel a fresh blister forming on her right heel. It was in the middle of this chaos. Just as she was trying to soothe an angry customer whose soup was cold, that the energy in the room shifted. It was a subtle but undeniable change. The chatter seemed too quiet for a second, then rise again in a more excited, hushed tone. Heads turned. Phones, held discreetly under tables, were subtly angled in the same direction. Chloe followed the line of sight to the front door. A family had just walked in. A tall, athletic man with a familiar, friendly face held the door for his wife, who was effortlessly elegant, and their two small children, who were bouncing with energy. It was Steph Curry. Chloe recognized him instantly, not just from his basketball career, but from the wholesome family man image he projected. The whole city knew who he was. The other servers seemed to freeze for a moment, their eyes wide with a mixture of shock and panic. A table like this was a huge opportunity, but also a huge amount of pressure. Mr. Davies immediately appeared from his office, his usual frown replaced by a greedy, simpering smile. He personally began to escort them to the best table in the house, a secluded booth in the corner. But the family's server for the day was, by chance, Chloe. She took a deep breath, pushing down the flutter of nerves. He was just a person, a customer, she told herself. A very famous one, but still just a customer who wanted a good lunch. She grabbed 2 kids' menus and a pack of crayons and approached the table, her professional smile firmly in place. "Good afternoon, welcome to the Gilded Spoon," she said, her voice steady. "My name is Chloe, and I'll be taking care of you today." Aisha Curry smiled warmly at her, a genuine smile that put Chloe immediately at ease. "It's so nice to meet you, Chloe. Thank you." The kids were already busy with the crayons, chattering away about the mac and cheese on the menu. Steph Curry gave her a polite nod, his eyes kind and unassuming. They were just a normal family out for lunch. Chloe took their drink order, her hands steady as she jotted it down on her notepad. For a few minutes, everything felt normal again. She was just a waitress doing her job. But as she walked away to put the order in, she glanced back and noticed one of the children, a little boy, starting to look upset. He was patting his pockets and looking around his seat with a growing panic on his face. His parents were trying to whisper to him, trying to soothe him, but Chloe could see the concern on their faces. The happy, relaxed energy at the table had suddenly evaporated. Something was wrong. The quiet sobs were the first thing that really cut through the restaurant noise for Chloe. It wasn't a loud, attention-seeking cry, but a deep, heartbreaking sound that a parent, or anyone with a heart, would recognize immediately. The little boy at the Curry family's table had his face buried in his mother's side. His small shoulders started to shake, and his quiet sounds of distress were getting harder to suppress. His father, the famous basketball player, was looking under the table and around the booth, his usual calm expression replaced with a look of genuine worry. Aisha Curry was whispering to her son, stroking his hair, but it wasn't working. The boy just shook his head, his words muffled by her dress. Chloe was standing a few feet away, waiting for the kitchen to fire the appetizers for another table. She could hear the snippets of their conversation. "It's gone, Mommy," the boy whimpered. "I can't find Leo." Chloe guessed was the missing object. She glanced over and saw Mr. Davies walking past the table. He didn't stop. He just gave a tight-lipped smile and a nod to the family, a gesture that was more for show than for comfort. He then paused to speak in a low, sharp voice to a younger server who was struggling with a tray of drinks. "Stay focused on your section, David. We don't have time for distractions today." The warning was clear, and it was meant for everyone to hear. Stay in your lane, do your job, don't cause trouble. Every part of Chloe's job training screamed at her to stay on her feet, to keep moving, to focus on her other tables who needed refills and checks. The manager was watching. The risk was huge. But the mother in her screamed louder. She knew that feeling of helplessness when your child is hurting and you can't fix it. She knew the desperate feeling of wanting to take away their pain and make everything right again. To that little boy, this wasn't a small problem. This was a tragedy. She made a choice. Approaching the table, she knelt down so she was at eye level with the boy. "Hi there," she said softly, her voice gentle and calm. "I couldn't help but overhear. Are you looking for something?" The boy peeked out at her, his eyes red and full of tears. He nodded, his bottom lip trembling. "My lion," he choked out. "Leo." Aisha Curry looked at Chloe with immense relief in her eyes. "It's his favorite stuffed animal," she explained in a low voice. His grandmother gave it to him. He's had it forever. Now Chloe understood it wasn't just a toy. It was a piece of home, a connection to someone he loved. The ache in her own feet and the stress of the shift melted away, replaced by a single-minded focus. "Okay, don't you worry," Chloe said, giving the boy a reassuring smile. "I'm really good at finding lost things. We'll find Leo." "Let me think. When was the last time you saw him?" The boy thought for a moment. "When we came in? I think he might have fallen out of my pocket." Chloe stood up and addressed the parents. "Please, don't worry. Let me just quickly look around the entrance and maybe near your host stand. I'll be right back." She gave them another calming look before turning away. She walked briskly but purposefully toward the front of the restaurant. Ignoring a gesture from another customer who needed their check, her heart was pounding, half from the risk she was taking, and half from the hope that she could fix this. She checked the host stand. The bench in the waiting area under the potted plants, nothing. Her stomach sank. He could be anywhere. The restaurant was busy, and a small toy could have been kicked or picked up by anyone. Then she thought about the small garden area just outside the main doors, where the restaurant grew a few herbs for decoration. It was a long shot, but it was worth a try. She pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped outside into the bright sunlight. The cool air was a welcome relief from the stuffy dining room. She scanned the stone patio and the planters. Her eyes scanned the ground, searching for a flash of yellow or brown. And then she saw it, tucked deep inside a large, overflowing planter of rosemary. A little lion with a frayed mane and one button eye was staring back at her. He was dirty and a little squashed, but he was there. A wave of triumph washed over her. She carefully picked up the little lion, brushing off the dirt and a stray rosemary leaf. Holding Leo in her hand felt like holding a victory trophy. She hurried back inside, her heart lighter now. She walked straight to the Curry family's table and held out the toy. "Is this who we're looking for?" she asked. The little boy's face lit up like a Christmas tree. He grabbed the lion and hugged it to his chest so tightly that Chloe thought it might burst. The sobs stopped instantly, replaced by happy, relieved hiccups. "Leo, you found him." Aisha Curry let out a huge sigh of relief, her shoulders slumping as the tension left her body. Steph Curry leaned across the table, his eyes full of sincere gratitude. "Wow," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "You're a lifesaver. Thank you so much. We were getting really worried." "You didn't have to do that for us," Aisha added, her voice full of emotion. "That was so incredibly kind." Chloe felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the heat from the kitchen. "It was my absolute pleasure," she said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "He's a very special lion." The rest of their meal went perfectly. They were kind, easy customers, and they didn't treat her any differently because of the small drama. When they were ready to leave, Steph Curry handled the bill himself. He handed the credit card machine back to Chloe, but when she looked at the screen, her breath caught in her throat. The tip he had left was $400. It was more than she made in 2 full, grueling days of work. It felt like a life raft thrown to her in the middle of a stormy sea. She fought back tears as she printed the receipt. They all thanked her one more time on their way out, the little boy waving his lion's paw at her with a huge smile on his face. For a few minutes, Chloe felt on top of the world. The tip was a miracle. It would cover the rent and the daycare bill and leave a little extra for groceries. She hummed to herself as she cleared the table from the family, her steps a little lighter. But the smile on her face didn't last long. As she was wiping down the booth, Mr. Davies appeared at her side. His face was a storm cloud. "Johnson," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "My office." Now, Chloe's stomach plummeted. The good feeling vanished, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. She followed him back to the small, cramped office in the back, the smell of paper and cleaning solvent filling her nose. He closed the door behind them and stood with his arms crossed. "Table 9, he said, not wasting any time. They were very unhappy. Said you abandoned them for over 15 minutes. Their food got cold. They demanded we comp their entire meal. We had to give them a gift certificate." Chloe tried to explain. "Mr. Davies, I wasn't just abandoning my table. There was a little boy who was crying his eyes out. He lost his favorite toy, and I was just trying to help them find it. It was just for a few minutes. Mr. Davies shook his head, his expression unyielding. I don't care if he lost the crown jewels. Your duty is to your tables and to this restaurant's reputation. We have rules for a reason. Your lapse in judgment cost this restaurant money and created a scene. His words were cold and final. He was looking at a balance sheet, not a human being. I'm sorry, he continued, not sounding sorry at all. I can't overlook this. We're going to have to let you go. The words didn't seem real. Let you go. Fired? Over what? Over helping a crying child find a lost toy? She felt the air leave her lungs. She thought of the $400 in her apron pocket, the generous gift from a kind family. It felt like a cruel joke now. She tried to say something, to protest, but the words wouldn't come. All that came out was a whisper of, "But—" "No buts, Chloe," he said, his voice softening only in the way someone does when they are dismissing you for good. Please clear out your locker and hand in your apron. Your final check will be mailed to you. Numb, Chloe turned and walked out of the office. She felt the eyes of her co-workers on her as she collected her things. The humiliation burned hot on her cheeks. She untied the white apron, the symbol of the job she had just lost, and placed it on the counter. Without a word to anyone, she walked out the back door and into the alley, the afternoon sun feeling too bright on her skin. She was unemployed, and she had absolutely no idea what she was going to do next. The alley behind the Gilded Spoon smelled like old garbage and wet cement. It was a stark, ugly contrast to the polished, fake elegance inside. Chloe stood there for a long moment, the heavy metal door swinging shut behind her with a final, echoing thud that sounded a lot like her career ending. Her hands were trembling. She balled them into fists and then uncurled them, trying to get the feeling back. The world felt muted. Sounds of the city traffic and distant sirens muffled by the roaring in her own ears. Fired. The word kept repeating in her head. A ugly, mean little word that held so much power. She had been fired for being kind. She had been punished for doing the right thing. The absurdity of it was so overwhelming it was almost funny. Almost she reached into her apron pocket, her fingers brushing against the crisp bills from the Curry family. $400? It felt like blood money now, a cruel reminder of the single selfless act that had led to this disaster. It was enough to tide her over for a week, maybe two if she was careful. But it wasn't a paycheck. It wasn't a guarantee. It was a one-time gift, a lucky lottery ticket that had just run out. She needed a steady job, a place where she could clock in, work hard, and know that rent would be paid. And right now, she had nothing. The thought of her son waiting at home, excited to tell her about his day at kindergarten, sent a fresh wave of panic through her. How could she go home and face him? How could she explain this to her mother, who had sacrificed so much to help her? She started walking, her feet aching as if in protest. The walk home had never felt so long. Every step was a reminder of her failure. She avoided looking at the people she passed, feeling like a giant sign was hanging around her neck that said fired. She felt their eyes on her, judging her. She knew it was probably all in her head, but the shame was a heavy cloak. When she finally got to her apartment building, she climbed the stairs slowly, her hand trailing on the cool metal railing. She paused at her front door, taking a deep breath before putting the key in the lock. She had to get herself under control. She couldn't let her son see her like this. She had to be strong for him. She opened the door to the sound of cartoons and the smell of her mother's famous chicken soup. Her mother looked up from the kitchen, her expression immediately changing from cheerful to concerned. "Honey, you're home early. You look pale. Are you okay?" Chloe just shook her head, the tears she had been holding back finally starting to pool in her eyes. She couldn't speak. Her mother came over and wrapped her in a hug, a warm, strong hug that smelled like flower and home. "Oh, baby. What happened?" Chloe buried her face in her mother's shoulder and let the sobs come, the story tumbling out in broken pieces between gulps of air. "I got fired," she cried. "I got fired because I helped that little boy find his toy." Her mother listened patiently, rubbing her back in soothing circles. When Chloe was finished, Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she held Chloe's face in her hands and looked her straight in the eye. "You did a good thing," she said, her voice firm and full of a love that was as strong as steel. "You did the right thing. A mother losing her job for being a good person? That is not your fault. That is the world being broken. Don't you ever feel ashamed for what you did?" Her words were a lifeline. They didn't fix the problem, but they fixed a part of Chloe that felt broken. She nodded, wiping her tears. Her son came running into the room then, a drawing clutched in his hand, his face beaming. "Mommy, look! I drew a rocket ship." He held up the picture, a colorful scribble that was the most beautiful thing Chloe had ever seen. She knelt down and hugged him tight, burying her face in his hair. In that moment, she made a promise to herself. She would not let this defeat her. She would find a way. The next few days were a blur of activity and anxiety. She updated her resume, a simple document that felt woefully inadequate. She went online, scrolling through job boards, her heart sinking with every posting. Seeking experienced server, must be available for flexible shifts. High-end dining experience required. The restaurant world was small, and she knew Mr. Davies would not give her a good reference. She was terrified. Every application felt like a shot in the dark. She went to a few interviews, but there was always an excuse. "You're overqualified for this position, or we've decided to go in a different direction." She felt like she had a black mark on her record, one that she couldn't explain without sounding like she was making excuses. The $400 was gone in an instant, spent on groceries and the late fee for her rent. The pressure was mounting, heavy weight on her chest that made it hard to breathe. She tried to stay positive for her son, but it was exhausting. He'd ask for a new toy he saw on TV, and her heart would ache. She'd have to say maybe later, sweetie, the words feeling like a lie. She started selling things she didn't need, a nice dress she wore once, a brand new coffee maker she'd gotten on sale. It brought in a little cash, but it wasn't enough. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, and the ground was starting to crumble beneath her feet. One afternoon, feeling completely hopeless, she decided to take her son to the park. She needed some fresh air, and she needed to see him happy, even if it was just for an hour. They were on the swings when her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She almost didn't answer it, expecting it to be a bill collector. But something made her swipe the screen. "Hello?" she said, her voice tentative. "Hi, is this Chloe Johnson?" A friendly voice asked on the other end. "Yes, this is she." "Hi, Chloe. My name's Karen. I was a customer at the Gilded Spoon the day the day the Curry family came in." Chloe froze. The memory was so fresh, so painful. "Oh," she said softly. "I'm sorry. I don't work there anymore." "No," Karen said, her voice full of sympathy. "That's actually why I'm calling. I was the woman sitting at the table right behind them. I saw the whole thing. I saw how you helped that little boy, and I saw how upset his parents were. And I saw your manager fire you." Chloe felt a lump form in her throat. "You did?" she whispered. "I did," Karen said firmly. "And I have never been more disgusted with a business in my life. It was the most unfair thing I've ever witnessed. I was so angry, I went home and posted about it on my social media. I just had to tell someone what happened." Chloe didn't know what to say. She was touched that a stranger cared enough to do that, but what good would it do now? "That's very kind of you," she said, her voice heavy. "You don't understand," Karen said, a sudden excitement in her tone. "I don't think you know what happened after I posted it. It went viral, Chloe. Absolutely viral. People are so mad about this. The news picked it up. There are hashtags. Hashtag Justice for Chloe. People are flooding the Gilded Spoon's online reviews and calling them nonstop. Everyone is talking about your kindness and that awful manager's cruelty." Chloe sank onto a nearby park bench, her son's laughter a distant sound. She felt dizzy. Viral. A news story. It was all too much to process. She, a single mother, just trying to survive, was suddenly the subject of a public outcry. It felt surreal, like something that happened to someone else in a movie. "I had no idea," she stammered. "Well, you should know," Karen continued. "You deserve to know that you are not the one who should be ashamed. You are the hero in this story. And I'm not the only one who thinks so." A reporter from a local news station just tried to contact me for a comment. They want to talk to you, Chloe. They want to hear your side of the story. For the first time in weeks, a flicker of something other than fear ignited in Chloe's chest. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was too soon for that. But it was something, it was a spark. The world had seen the injustice. It wasn't just her private shame anymore. It was out there in the open. And for the first time since she'd walked out of that alley, Chloe felt like she wasn't completely alone. She looked at her son, who was now trying to climb up the slide the wrong way. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a real, genuine smile touch her lips. Maybe, just maybe, everything wasn't over after all. The world outside Chloe's small apartment felt like it was moving at a different speed. Inside, there was the quiet rhythm of her son's breathing and the slow, steady anxiety of her own mind. Outside, a storm was brewing, and she was at the very center of it. The phone call from Karen had been the first raindrop. The next few days were a downpour. Her old phone, which she mostly used for work and to call her mother, started buzzing and chiming constantly. It was a sound she used to dread, a sign of a demanding manager or an angry customer. Now, it was something else entirely. It was the sound of the world waking up to her story. It started with a friend request on social media, then another and another. Her inbox, which had been a ghost town for years, was suddenly flooded. Most were messages from strangers, people she had never met. "We are so sorry this happened to you. You are an inspiration. Don't give up. The whole city's on your side." She scrolled through hundreds of them, her eyes wide with disbelief. Each message was a tiny piece of support. And together, they felt like a warm blanket against the cold reality of her unemployment. The hashtag Karen had mentioned, hashtag Justice for Chloe, was real. She typed it into the search bar, and her screen filled with posts. There were angry rants about the Gilded Spoon, viral screenshots of their terrible online reviews, and countless posts praising her for her kindness. People were sharing pictures of their own children's favorite stuffed animals with the hashtag. It was a wave of public support so powerful, it was almost scary. The first real-life sign of this change came a few days later. A news van, with a local station's logo emblazoned on the side, was parked at the end of her street. Chloe saw it from her window, and her heart hammered against her ribs. They were here for her. She felt a surge of panic, the same feeling she used to get when Mr. Davies called her into his office. But this time, her mother was there, and she squeezed her hand. "You just tell the truth, baby," her mother said. "You hold your head up high. You have nothing to be ashamed of." Taking a deep breath, Chloe agreed to the interview. She stood on her small front porch, the camera pointed at her, the bright lights making her squint. The reporter, a woman with kind eyes and a serious expression, asked her gently to tell her story. And so she did. She talked about the little boy's tears, about the frantic search for the lost lion, and about the feeling of relief when she found it. She didn't mention the tip. It felt too private. But she did talk about the cold feeling in Mr. Davies' office, and the shame of being fired. As she spoke, she felt a strength she didn't know she had. She wasn't just a victim. She was a mother, and she had done what any mother would have done. The interview aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news. Her mother, her son, and Chloe all sat on the couch, watching her own face fill the screen. It was surreal. After the segment, the news anchor shook her head and said, "A truly incredible story. It seems the Gilded Spoon's loss is the community's gain." The next day, the story was everywhere. The local news piece was picked up by national outlets. It wasn't just a local story anymore. It was a national conversation about corporate greed, kindness, and basic human decency. Chloe's phone rang off the hook with requests for interviews from radio stations and morning shows. She even got an email from a well-known daytime talk show asking if she would be willing to come on and share her story. The restaurant, the Gilded Spoon, was feeling the full force of the backlash. Their social media pages were a disaster zone, flooded with angry comments and one-star reviews. People started organizing protests outside the restaurant. Small groups of people holding signs that said kindness isn't a fireable offense and boycott the Gilded Spoon. Pressure was immense. It was during this media, storm that Chloe received a very different kind of message. It was an email from a man who identified himself as the head of public relations for the Curry family. He wrote that Steph and Aisha had been sick and saddened to learn what had happened to her. He said they felt a deep sense of responsibility for the situation, as it was their family's presence that had indirectly led to her being fired. They wanted to speak with her directly. Chloe stared at the email, her hands shaking. She wasn't just a random person who had been on the news anymore. The famous family at the center of all this knew her name. She was nervous, but she agreed to a video call. A day later, she was sitting in front of her laptop, her heart pounding as the call connected. The face that filled the screen was one she recognized from countless interviews and commercials. It was Aisha Curry. She was sitting in what looked like a beautiful, sun-filled kitchen. "Chloe," she said, her voice just as warm and kind as it had been in the restaurant. "Hi, it's so good to finally meet you properly. I am so sorry for everything you've been through." Chloe was speechless for a moment. It's okay," she managed to say. "You have nothing to be sorry for." "No, we do," Aisha insisted. "You showed our family such incredible kindness, and you were punished for it. That's not right. And we want to help." Then Steph Curry's face popped into the frame beside his wife's. He leaned closer to the camera. "Listen, we've been following your story," he said, his expression serious and sincere. "We've read the comments, we've seen the news, and the whole country is on your side. But admiration doesn't pay the bills. We know that. We know that you're a mom, and you have a little boy to take care of, and we just can't stand by and do nothing." Chloe felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. For weeks, she had felt so alone, so powerless. Now, two of the most famous people in the world were talking to her from their home, telling her they wanted to help. "You are an amazing person," Chloe Aisha continued. "What you did was a beautiful act of love. And we want to turn that negativity into something positive, not just for you, but for other people too." Explained that they had been brainstorming, trying to figure out the best way to support her. It wasn't just about a cash gift. It was about something bigger, something that would give her a future, not just a temporary fix. "We have a foundation," Steph explained. "It's called Eat, Learn, Play, and its whole purpose is to help kids and families just like you were trying to help our son. We want to offer you a job with us. A real job. You wouldn't be a waitress. We need someone with your heart, your compassion, to help us connect with the communities we serve. We want you to be a part of our team." Chloe couldn't believe what she was hearing. A job. Not just any job, but a job with an organization dedicated to helping children. It felt like a dream. That's amazing," she stammered, the words barely a whisper. "I don't know what to say." "Just say yes," Aisha said, smiling. "But that's not all," Steph added. "We know this has been a huge financial strain, so we want to set up a trust fund for your son's education, to make sure his future is secure, no matter what." Chloe broke down then, the tears she had been holding back for weeks finally flowing freely. It wasn't just about money. It was about security. It was about not having to lie awake at night worrying about how she would provide for him. It was about knowing her son would have opportunities she never did. The Curry family patiently waited, giving her space to feel her emotions. "And one last thing," Aisha said, when Chloe had composed herself. "We're holding a small press conference tomorrow. We're going to make a public statement about all of this. We want the world to know the incredible woman you are, and we want to formally invite you to be there with us, as our guest and as our new partner." Chloe agreed, her mind still reeling. When the call ended, she sat in silence for a long time, just staring at the blank screen of her laptop. The impossible had happened. Her story, which had started with her losing everything, was about to enter a chapter she never could have imagined. The next day, she wouldn't be a jobless waitress anymore. She would be walking into a press conference, standing alongside one of the most famous couples in the world, ready to start a brand new life. It was, she thought with a dazed smile, truly unbelievable. The morning of the press conference felt like the first day of a brand new life. Chloe woke up not to the shrill beep of an alarm clock, but to the soft light of the sun filtering through her blinds. For the first time in months, she didn't have a knot of anxiety in her stomach. There was no rush to get to a shift she didn't have, no worry about how she would pay a bill. Instead, there was a quiet sense of peace, a feeling that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She watched her son sleep for a few minutes, his face peaceful and untroubled, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. This new beginning wasn't just for her. It was for him. It was for his future. A car had been sent for her. It was a sleek black town car that looked completely out of place on her modest street. When it pulled up, her mother gave her a long, proud hug. "You go in there and show them who you are," her mother whispered, her own eyes shining with tears. "You've always been my hero. Now, it's time for the world to see it." Chloe nodded, her own throat tight with emotion. Her son, who only knew that his mom was going to be on TV, gave her a big hug and told her to be super famous. She promised she would try. The ride to the Foundation's headquarters was a quiet one. Chloe stared out the window as the familiar city streets blurred past. It felt like she was leaving an old version of herself behind. The driver opened her door, and she walked into a beautiful, modern building. A friendly assistant greeted her by name and led her to a small, private room where Aisha and a team of people were waiting. Aisha immediately pulled her into a hug, as if they were old friends. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, her smile reassuring. "I think so," Chloe said, her voice a little shaky. "You're going to be great," Aisha said. "Just be yourself. That's all we want. That's the person everyone has been fighting for." Stylist came in and helped Chloe pick out a simple but elegant blue dress. It was comfortable and it made her feel confident. As she sat in a chair getting her makeup lightly done, she felt a strange sense of calm. She thought about the past few weeks, the humiliation, the panic hand. It all felt like a distant nightmare. This was the reality now. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. The tired, anxious woman from a few weeks ago was gone. In her place was a woman who had been through a fire and came out stronger. The press conference was held. In a large conference room with a podium at the front and rows of cameras from every major news outlet, the room was buzzing with anticipation. Chloe's heart beat a little faster, but she wasn't scared. She felt Aisha's hand on her shoulder, a grounding, supportive presence. They stood off to the side as Steph Curry walked up to the podium. The flashes from the cameras were blinding, a constant. Strobing light that made the moment feel hyper-real. Steph cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady and clear. "A few weeks ago, my family and I had a wonderful lunch at a restaurant called the Gilded Spoon. It was a lovely experience, made possible by our waitress, Chloe Johnson." He paused and gestured for Chloe to come forward. Aisha gave her a gentle nudge, and Chloe walked to the podium, standing beside Steph. The cameras flashed even brighter. "This is Chloe," Steph continued, "and I want to be very clear about something. The story that has been in the news is not the story of a single event. It's the story of a person's character. During our lunch, our son lost his favorite stuffed animal. He was heartbroken. And Chloe, seeing a child in distress, went above and beyond. She spent her own time, her break, searching for this toy. She didn't do it for a tip or for recognition. She did it out of the goodness of her heart. She showed our family incredible compassion." He looked out at the sea of reporters, his expression hardening slightly. And for that act of kindness, Chloe was fired by her employer. "We were shocked and deeply disappointed when we learned this. We believe that kindness should be celebrated, not punished." Chloe's story struck a chord with millions of people. Because it's a simple but powerful idea. Doing the right thing matters. He then turned to look at Chloe, a genuine warm smile on his face. "We can't undo what happened to her, but we can try to turn a negative into a positive. We believe Chloe's skills, her empathy, her dedication, her heart, are exactly what the world needs more of. So, on behalf of our Eat, Learn, Play Foundation, we are thrilled to announce that Chloe Johnson will be joining our team as our new Director of Community Outreach." A wave of applause filled the room. Chloe felt her eyes well up with tears. This was real. It was really happening. But Steph wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he said, his voice rising with passion, We know that Chloe's biggest motivation is her son. So, to ensure that he has every opportunity in the world, we are establishing a full educational trust fund in his name. We want to make sure his future is bright and that he can pursue any dream he has without his mother ever having to worry about it again. The applause was deafening now. Chloe could barely see the cameras through her tears. She reached out and squeezed Aisha's hand, who was beaming beside her. Steph then stepped back and gave Chloe the microphone. It was her turn. She took a deep breath, the story that had been bottled up inside her for so long finally ready to be told on her own terms. "Hello," she began, her voice a little shaky but clear. "I'm not used to talking to this many people, so please bear with me. A few weeks ago, I was a waitress who lost her job. And honestly, I felt lost too. I was scared about how I would take care of my son. But then something incredible happened. Strangers, people I had never met, started to care. They shared my story, and they lifted me up when I couldn't stand on my own. And then this family," she said, looking at Steph and Aisha. "They didn't just see a news story. They saw a person. They showed me that one act of kindness can create ripples of kindness that can spread across the whole world." She looked directly into the cameras, her voice strong with conviction. "I lost a job, but in doing what I thought was right, I found something so much more valuable. I found my purpose. I want to thank everyone who supported me, and I want to make a promise. I will spend the rest of my life trying to pay this forward. I will work for this foundation, and I will dedicate myself to helping other families, other children, so that maybe no one else has to feel the fear and helplessness that I felt. Thank you." She stepped back from the podium, and the room erupted in a standing ovation. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated support. In that moment, Chloe wasn't a victim or a charity case. She was a symbol. She was a woman who had faced down injustice with grace and had emerged not just victorious, but radiant. In the weeks and months that followed, Chloe's life changed completely. She started her new job, throwing herself into the work with the same passion she had put into everything else. She was a natural. She organized community events, connected with families in need, and became a powerful voice for the Foundation's mission. The first event she ran was a stuffed animal drive, where they collected thousands of new and gently loved toys for children in hospitals and shelters. It was her way of honoring the little lion named Leo that started it all. The Gilded Spoon, on the other hand, did not fare so well. The boycotts and bad press continued, and within 6 months, the restaurant closed its doors for good. Mr. Davies faded into obscurity, his strict rules and lack of compassion proving to be a terrible business model in the end. Chloe never forgot what it felt like to have nothing. It made her appreciate everything she had now. She bought a small, comfortable house in a nice neighborhood with a backyard for her son to play in. But the best things in her new life weren't material. It was the security of knowing she could pay her bills without a second thought. It was the pride she felt in her work. It was seeing her son thrive in a good school, excited about his future. Her story became a legend, a modern-day fable told in classrooms and offices. It was a reminder that in a world that can often feel cold and uncaring, a single, selfless act of kindness can change a life in ways you could never imagine. And for Chloe, a waitress who once lost everything for doing the right thing, her life was proof that kindness in the end always wins.